Hello everyone, we're talking about global governance in this presentation, and our objective here is to identify what is the nature of global governance, how has global governance been effective, what are the criticisms against global governance. We'll also look at the United Nations as the flagship organization for global governance. How well has it fared? What criticisms against the UN exist? And all these issues relating to the fostering of global governance. Now, global governance, by way of definition, involves policies or processes and institutions that are both formal and informal that help to advance the cause of development, of progress, prosperity for the human race, for the international system. And of course, global governance is distinct, is different from global government. Because while governance is a process, government is a noun. Governance, on the other hand, is a verb. All right. So even though there's the absence of a global government that superintends, that coordinates, regulates the behavior and activities of state actors, particularly, there has always been, there is, and there will always be global governance in process. And that's because we are always trying as a human society to better our lot, to push the frontiers of development socially, politically, economically for ourselves. And of course, in doing this, both state and non-state actors are involved. NGOs are involved, multinationals are involved, even individuals themselves are involved in the global governance process. Now, international laws, which of course are sometimes used synonymously as international institutions, are established for three major functions. Of course, not restricted to these three, but these three, primarily. And those functions are the fact that international laws help to coordinate global linkages, in terms of gathering resources, managing resources, storing these resources for future use, of course, resources such as information and other resources too, so these resources help to foster the linkages among particularly state actors and non-state actors in the international system, and of course helps to further advance global governance. International laws also help to respond to mutual challenges, common issues or problems that face the collectivity of the human community. And so international laws provide a platform for responding to such global concerns. And finally, international laws also help to protect and promote core values of accountability, transparency, justice, freedom, liberty, equality, all of these core values that the international system holds dear, and of course that also help to advance global governance, are secured, are protected by international laws. Now, international laws and institutions are sometimes used interchangeably, and that's because international institutions have to do with laws, norms, regulations, rules that regulate the behavior of states. And so such state behaviors that are regulated by these laws, are what we refer to as, or the laws that help to regulate state behaviors are what we refer to as international institutions. And so even though international laws are not the only institutions that exist, because like we said, they're both formal and informal, international laws constitute a significant part of international institutions. And so that's why, they can be used interchangeably. Now, the concept of order, is perceived differently from a realist and liberal perspective. While the realist sees order as only possible by wars, the liberals believe that cooperation is possible, that institutions can help to provide order in the international system. And of course, they also subscribe to international laws and international institutions as a way of instituting or establishing order. All right. International organizations as well are different from international institutions slightly, in the sense that organizations are the physical instances, the budgets, the offices, the office complex, the furnitures, the staff of of international organizations. Those are those are those are the organizational parts of international institutions, whereas institutions themselves are the policies, the laws, the programs, that these organizations intend to pursue. And so, while institutions are more intangible, organizations are the more tangible aspects. All right. Of course, we know that multilateral diplomacy rather, is a very key aspect of global governance, because you must get sovereign states to come together and cooperate. And international law also provides such a basis for cooperation among three or more states. Such cooperation must be based on what is called the principle of reciprocity, because all the actors in that relationship must be mutually benefiting. Okay, and the only basis for that to occur is the basis provided by international laws, where all actors are cooperating, are acting in accordance with these prescribed rules, these prescribed norms. And so international laws in this regard helps largely to foster global governance. Of course, international laws, like many other social science concepts and phenomenon, has not been without its criticisms. International law has been criticized for being Western oriented, Western dominated, and of course, not paying attention to the values, the culture, the ethics, social ethics, of several other parts of the world, Africa, Asia, the Middle East. And so you find out that some states rogue on international laws. They go rogue on international laws because they believe that these laws do not take into consideration, do not take into cognizance their own unique ideas, beliefs, and what have you. And in fact, it is also believed that the UN, and other relevant international organizations are also puppets, are cronies of Western ideologies, and so they're Western dominated, and they're used as an instrument to foster the Western European agenda. All of these are criticisms against international laws. But of course, international laws, despite these criticisms, continues to gain more and more acceptance, and so it's moving to a more supranational level, because individuals, groups, non-state actors continue to accept and embrace and promote, enforce, implement these international laws. And so because of this wide acceptance, because of this growing relevance of international laws, it is gaining a more supranational dimension. And of course, that can be seen in so many policies, programs that are given to protect individuals, to protect vulnerable population, the aged, women, disabled, and what have you. So international laws continue to gain more prominence and acceptance. Now, the UN, we said, is one of the flagships of the global governance movement, or of global governance. And the activities of the UN have been very significant in fostering global governance. But of course, the UN was established as a reform to the League of Nations after the Second World War. The League of Nations failed to prevent a Second World War. And so there had to be a reform of that league to what we now know as United Nations. Of course, founded in 1945, first of all with 50 countries, and of course Poland making the 51st country, you know, the UN started off as an organization with just 51 members, but today the UN has grown to more than 100% that same number, with 193 members. That is almost a 200% increase, or even 300% increase. But of course, there are still some territories that are still not members of the UN for various reasons, which of course you can see on the slide. The UN has certain objectives. 5 of them are summarized here, which of course are contained in the UN Charter. The UN Charter contains these objectives in more detail, but these objectives are the major objectives that the UN intends to pursue. And a closer look at these objectives would show, or would tell, that these objectives are in line largely with the goals of global governance, which of course includes development, peace, prosperity, protection, for all. These goals of global governance are in line with the objectives of the UN. And so that's why the UN is regarded as the flagship organization for global governance. These are a few facts about the UN, which obviously you must know. 193 members. It has its own independent status, its own flag, its own territory, on foreign soil anyway. Of course, it is headquartered in New York, in the United States, but of course there are also country offices in all the 193 states, member states of the UN. Of course, you should also know about the official languages of the UN. All of these languages are always, available at every UN gathering, either by translation or by voice editing, voice translation, language translation, either technologically or manually. These are always available. And of course, there's also availability of sign language, for those who have hearing impairment. So these are facts about the UN. And of course, another important fact is the fact that the Security Council of the UN has 5 permanent members who have the veto power. And this has also been a very important critique of the UN over the years. Since the inception of the UN, these 5 permanent members have always been on the Security Council. And so refusing to reform that structure doesn't show, the growth of the members of the UN, or the growth of the issues, the complexity of the issues that the UN currently grapples with. And that's why this has been a major critique of the United Nations. Now, the structures, there are 6 of them, 6 major structures of the United Nations, which we'll briefly talk about. All right, the first one is the General Assembly, which of course has as its members all the 193 member states, and significantly serves as a global town hall where all these states come together to brainstorm, to fine-tune their policies, or to find mutual grounds on which they can cooperate with other states in the international system. All right, and of course it's presided by a president who is elected on an annual basis. The Security Council is the next important organ of the UN. The Security Council, of course, has 15 members, 5 of which, like we said, are permanent, and 3 articles that make the Security Council even more significant are Articles 39, 41, and 42. And of course, you can see on the slide, while these articles, give certain privileges, responsibilities to the Security Council that sets it apart from other organs of the UN. All right. The Secretariat is another important organ of the UN, because this is where administrative responsibilities, the day-to-day running of the organization is done. And of course, it is headed by the Security Council, like we said, headquartered in New York, but coordinating activities also across the world in furtherance of global governance. The Trusteeship Council was established to oversee the movement from colonial to independence of certain colonial territories, especially in the 1980s, 90s, and of course, throughout the waves of independence from 1960 down to 1994, when Palau and, of course, South Africa gained independence from apartheid regime, and of course, Palau, from colonial masters. But of course, since then, the Trusteeship Council has remained a part of the UN's organs. And even though that has been debated, it still remains non-functional, but still a part of the organs. The Economic and Social Council, which is also called the ECOSOC, is another organ that is charged with responsibility of ensuring economic and social development across all the 193 member states of the UN. And so the ECOSOC is charged with coming up with policies on education, policies on culture, policies on social development, policies on policies that are aimed at helping to foster the economic and social development of these 193 member states. And of course, this council is made up of 54 member states of the UN that, of course, is changed after every 3-year term. The ICJ is believed to be the religious hub of the UN, and that's because it tries cases that are brought by member states against other member states of the UN, and it ensures that there's justice, that there's redress for member states of the UN. And of course, this court does not try criminal cases, does not try cases of human rights violations, which of course has been a major critique of this organ of the UN. But be that as it may, the ICJ still subsists as a very significant organ of the United Nations, which of course cannot be glossed over. 15 judges that also have a tenure of office. All right. Peace for the UN has remained a very important concern. And over the years, so many policies and programs have been established to ensure that there is lasting peace in the international system. One of such was the Agenda for Peace by Boutros Ghali, who was a former UN Secretary General. He outlined 4 activities that he believed would go a long way to foster the agenda for peace. And these activities include preventive diplomacy, include peacemaking, peacekeeping, and of course, peace building post-conflict. All right, the question is, how well has the UN embraced these activities? How well have UN programs and actions and activities helped to reflect this agenda as argued by Boutros Ghali? We can see that many of the actions and activities of the UN have helped to further advance and further buttress, further promote these 4 core activities that Boutros Ghali outlined here of preventive diplomacy, peacemaking, peacekeeping, and post-conflict peace building. And some of them are the emphasis on human security as opposed to traditional military security, of the Cold War era, the World War I and II era. Now there's emphasis on environmental security, there's emphasis on food security, on personal security, on health security, on community security, political security. All of these are aspects of the human security framework that help to reduce poverty, that help to reduce hunger, that help to promote increased standard of living of people and communities, as it were. And of course, this is also helping largely to further advance the cause of global governance. the UN peacekeeping missions have also been a very significant aspect of the UN's, agenda for peace, or activities to promote or further advance the cause of peace. Of course, the UN peacekeeping missions have been largely applauded for their bravery, for their courage in helping to suppress violence, to end conflict in many regions of the world, particularly in Africa, and of course in other regions in Europe and even Asia. All right. So, of course, most of the other information you need about the UN peacekeeping missions you can find in other literature. But the point is that the peacekeeping mission has remained a very, very significant tool for keeping peace, for making peace in very many areas of the world. And these peacekeeping troops and missions have also not come without their own constraints and challenges. Funding, soldiers, equipment, resources have been among the top challenges of the UN peacekeeping missions, but that has not deterred them from their efforts in keeping peace. Of course, economic and social issues have also been at the front burner of the UN's actions and policies. The Millennium Development Goals of the year 2000 to 2015, and of course, Sustainable Development Goals from 2015 to 2030 have been one of such issues that have highlighted and emphasized, economic security, economic development, social development, education, gender equality, environmental security, political security, inclusion, social justice. All of these are issues that have been emphasized by these goals, and all in a way to further advance the cause of global governance. Like I said, the UN has not also come without its criticisms, and one of them is the inability of the Security Council to reform and reflect its growing membership, reflect the complexity of issues that currently face the UN. Of course, the Security Council is expected to have reformed, particularly the 5 permanent members. It's expected to have reformed to reflect this dynamic, growing, changing society that we live in. But despite applications, despite agitations by several states to be admitted into this permanent caucus, that has not been done, and that constitutes one of the very important issues pertaining to reforms of the UN. And of course there are several other issues that relate to how the UN responds, to international issues related to terrorism, environmental degradation, environmental pollution, nuclear proliferation, and so on and so forth. And of course, all these issues are begging for reforms, are begging for more interest, more capacity building, more information gathering, more information analyzing, and so the UN, if it must remain relevant, must continue to reform in this area so that it can better respond to these issues that of course have assumed a very complex dimension, have assumed a very multifaceted, growingly intriguing dimension. All right. Now, here are a few questions that you can practice just by way of summary, to help us understand what we have discussed so far in this presentation. I believe that answering these questions would be of tremendous help in helping you remember what we have said so far. And of course, if there are any questions, if there are any concerns you have, any comments you have, you can always send them to me through my contact details, which I'm sure are available to you.